St. Peter's Square. The 13th of May, 1981. A white vehicle moves slowly through the crowd. 4 shots break the hum. Karol Wojtyla's body went limp. The bullets struck his abdomen and arm. The Roots. St. Peter's Square. The 13th of May, 1981. A white vehicle moves slowly through the crowd. 4 shots break the hum. Karol Wojtyla's body went limp. The bullets struck his abdomen and arm. This day changed him forever. But the story of the man who became a target began 61 years earlier. In a small Polish town. On the 18th of May, 1920, Karol Józef Wojtyla was born in Wadowis. His father, a retired lieutenant, was a man of strict rules. Deeply religious. His mother, Emilia, managed the home. She was often ill. Karol had an older brother, Edmund, who chose the path of a doctor. The family lived modestly. Childhood was filled with prayer and discipline. Death entered the home early. Karol was 8 years old when his mother died. Kidney failure. 3 years later, scarlet fever took the life of his brother Edmund. He caught the infection from a patient at the hospital. Karol was left with his father. These losses shaped his character. They taught him to accept suffering as part of being. His father became his whole world. He taught him resilience. They prayed together, read, and spoke of God. Karol's youth was theater and poetry. He acted on stage, he wrote poems. Language was his passion. He felt its power, its music. Friends called him Lolek. He loved football, kayaking, ski trips in the mountains. His physical endurance was exceptional. He grew up in the atmosphere of a reborn Poland. Patriotism was in the air. But the shadow of a great war was already covering Europe. Occupation. The 1st of September, 1939. German forces crossed the Polish border. The war began. Krakow, where Karol had moved to study, fell under occupation. The university was closed. Intellectuals were targeted. To avoid deportation to Germany for forced labor, every able-bodied man had to have a job. Karol found work. First, in a limestone quarry. The work was physically crushing. Cold stone, dust, the constant ache in his muscles. It was a world of pure physical effort. A brutal education. Later, he transferred to the Solvay chemical factory. The labor was different, but the goal was the same. Survival. Among the workers, he saw the dignity of labor. He felt the solidarity of men facing a common oppressor. During this time, he did not abandon his love for the stage. He co-founded the Rhapsodic Theater. It was an underground act of cultural resistance. They performed in secret apartments. The spoken word was their weapon against the occupying force. It was a declaration that Polish culture was alive. A profound change occurred within him. He was struck by a car. A close brush with death. He began to see his path differently. The call to the priesthood, once a faint whisper, became a clear command. The stage was about saving culture. The church was about saving souls. In 1942, he made his choice. He knocked on the door of the Archbishop's residence in Krakow. Adam Stefan Sapieha, the Archbishop, ran a clandestine seminary. Karol Wojtyla became a secret student of theology. He studied in the shadows, living under the constant threat of discovery. The war raged outside, but inside the palace, he prepared for a different kind of battle. Ascension. The war ended. The Soviet army replaced the German one. A new occupation began, this time ideological. On the 1st of November, 1946, Karol Wojtyla was ordained a priest. His superiors saw his intellectual gifts. They sent him to Rome. He studied at the Pontifical Angelicum University. He lived in a city rebuilding itself. He learned. He prayed. He earned his doctorate in theology in 1948. He returned to a Poland under communist control. His first assignment was a small village parish. Then he was moved to Krakow. He became a chaplain for university students. He was not a distant figure. He joined them on hikes, on kayaking trips. He spoke their language. He discussed faith, love, and the meaning of life. He treated their questions with seriousness. He built a community of trust in an era of suspicion. His academic career grew. He became a professor of ethics. He taught at the Jagiellonian University in Krakow and at the Catholic University of Lublin. He wrote books, articles. He developed a philosophy called personalism. It focused on the unique value of the human person. This idea was a direct challenge to the communist system, a system that saw people as cogs in a machine. The Vatican noticed his leadership. In 1958, Pope Pius XII appointed him auxiliary bishop of Krakow. He was only 38 years old. 6 years later, in 1964, Pope Paul VI named him Archbishop of Krakow. This role placed him in direct confrontation with the state. The government sought to control every aspect of life, including faith. Wojtyla resisted. Not with loud protest, but with intellectual rigor and unyielding spiritual work. He fought for permits to build new churches. He strengthened the spiritual life of his diocese. He became a symbol of Polish identity, separate from the communist state. Conclave. The year 1978 was a year of seismic change in the Vatican. In August, Pope Paul VI died. The College of Cardinals convened. They elected the Patriarch of Venice, Albino Luciani. He took the name John Paul I. His pontificate was a brief smile. It lasted only 33 days. He was found dead in his apartment. The Vatican was plunged back into a state of uncertainty. For the second time in less than 2 months, the cardinals filed into the Sistine Chapel. The heavy doors were sealed. The conclave began. The initial ballots showed a deep division. 2 powerful Italian cardinals were the frontrunners: Giovanni Benelli of Florence and Giuseppe Siri of Genoa. Neither could secure the necessary 2/3 majority. The voting repeated. Again and again. Deadlock. The Italian cardinals blocked each other. Slowly, a new idea emerged. A radical idea. To look beyond Italy. The name of the Archbishop of Krakow, Karol Wojtyla, began to circulate. He was known from the Second Vatican Council. He was intellectually formidable. He had stood against communism. He was physically strong. A man from a Slavic nation. A man from behind the Iron Curtain. On the 16th of October, on the 8th ballot, the choice was made. White smoke poured from the chimney above the chapel. The crowd in St. Peter's Square roared. A senior cardinal appeared on the balcony. He announced the ancient words. Habemus Papam. We have a pope. The name he spoke was not Italian. It was Polish. Karol Wojtyla. For the first time in 455 years, the Pope was not an Italian. The new pontiff appeared. He chose the name John Paul II, to honor his predecessor. He spoke to the crowd in Italian, a language he was still mastering. He called himself a man from a far country. He asked them to correct his mistakes. The world watched, stunned. A new era had begun. The hammer on the system. In June of 1979, John Paul II returned to Poland. The communist government had agreed to the visit with deep reluctance. They feared the power of his presence. Their fears were justified. His arrival was not just a pastoral visit. It was a 9-day earthquake. Millions of Poles poured into the streets. They lined the roads. They filled the squares. It was a pilgrimage of an entire nation. For the first time in decades, the people saw they were not a scattered minority. They were a vast, unified sea of faith. The climax of the visit occurred in Warsaw. On Victory Square. He stood before a huge, simple cross. He delivered a sermon that became a turning point in history. He did not call for violence or open rebellion. He spoke of Poland's deep Christian roots. He spoke of a spiritual identity that no political system could erase. He ended his homily with a prayer. A plea to God. Let your Spirit descend and renew the face of the earth, the face of this land. The words ignited a fire in the hearts of millions. The crowd roared its approval. The message was clear. Change was not only possible, it was inevitable. The visit broke the spell of fear that had paralyzed Eastern Europe. It demonstrated that the power of the state was not absolute. A year later, in the shipyards of Gdansk, workers formed an independent trade union. They called it Solidarity. Its leader, an electrician named Lech Walesa, was a devout Catholic. John Paul II provided the movement with crucial moral backing. He defended the rights of workers and the dignity of the human person. His papacy became a source of constant pressure on the Soviet Union and its satellite regimes. He did not wield armies or economic power. His weapon was truth. His battlefield was the human conscience. From Rome, the Polish Pope was systematically dismantling an empire. The attempt. The narrative returns to the moment of the bullets. St. Peter's Square. The 13th of May, 1981. The date was significant. It was the anniversary of the first apparition of Our Lady of Fatima. John Paul II was in his open-topped vehicle, moving slowly among the faithful. He was holding a small child. He had just handed the child back to her parents when the shots were fired. 4 of them. The assassin was Mehmet Ali Adka, a Turkish militant. He used a 9mm Browning semi-automatic pistol. The bullets found their mark. One struck the Pope's abdomen. It tore through his intestines. Another hit his left index finger. A third and fourth struck 2 bystanders. Panic erupted. The Pope slumped into the arms of his secretary, Stanislaw Dziwisz. His white cassock began to turn red. The vehicle sped out of the square towards the Gemelli Hospital. The journey was a race against death. He was losing a massive amount of blood. He was conscious, praying. The surgery lasted more than 5 hours. The damage to his organs was severe. The surgeons fought to save his life. He survived. Days later, from his hospital bed, he offered a message. Pray for the brother who shot me. I have sincerely forgiven him. He was convinced his survival was a miracle. He attributed his life to the intervention of the Virgin Mary of Fatima. One hand had fired the gun. Another hand had guided the bullet's path. This belief became a central part of his personal story. He later requested the bullet that had been extracted from his body. He traveled to the shrine at Fatima in Portugal. He had the bullet set into the crown of the statue of the Virgin. 2 years later, in December of 1983, he went to Rebibbia prison in Rome. He met with Mehmet Ali Agca. The two men sat in the stark prison cell. They spoke quietly for about 20 minutes. The content of their conversation was never fully revealed. The image, however, spoke volumes. The victim, a global spiritual leader, meeting with his would-be killer. It was a living sermon on forgiveness. A physical act of mercy. Apostle of peace. The pontificate of John Paul II was defined by motion. He was a global pilgrim. He refused to be confined to the Vatican. He saw the world as his parish. His travels were unprecedented. He made 104 apostolic journeys outside of Italy. He visited 129 countries. His travels covered a distance that was more than 3 times the distance between the Earth and the Moon. He was the most traveled pope in history, a title he held by a vast margin. Each journey was a deliberate act of evangelization. He met with heads of state. He also met with the poor, the sick, and the marginalized. He delivered thousands of speeches. His core message was consistent and firm. He spoke of the sacredness of human life, from conception to natural death. He condemned what he termed the culture of death. This was his label for abortion, euthanasia, and capital punishment. He championed human rights and religious freedom in every corner of the globe. He was a master of communication. He had a unique ability to connect with vast crowds. He understood the power of symbols. He would kiss the ground upon arrival in a new country, a gesture of respect for the land and its people. He would often wear traditional local headwear, another sign of his desire to connect. He showed respect for every culture he encountered. A key part of his outreach was dialogue. He sought to build bridges between faiths. In 1986, he invited leaders from the world's major religions to Assisi, Italy. They gathered not to debate theology, but to pray for peace. It was a powerful and, for some, controversial image. It showed his deep commitment to interreligious understanding. He was the first pope to visit a synagogue, the Great Synagogue of Rome. He was also the first pope to enter a mosque, the Umayyad Mosque in Damascus. He had a special connection with young people. He established the World Youth Days in 1985. These became massive international gatherings. Millions of young Catholics would come together every few years in different cities around the world. He spoke to them directly. He challenged them to be saints for the new millennium. He was not a distant, old figure to them. He was a father, a guide, a source of inspiration. Decline. The final years of his pontificate were a public demonstration of suffering. The athletic man who skied in the mountains was gone. He was replaced by a frail figure, stooped and slow. The diagnosis was Parkinson's disease. Its effects became progressively more visible. His speech slurred. A tremor shook his left hand. Walking became an immense effort. He used a cane, then a wheeled platform. He did not hide his infirmity. He allowed the world to witness his physical decline. This became his final sermon. He taught that suffering, when accepted and offered to God, had redemptive value. Despite his failing health, he continued his duties. A major event of his late reign was the Great Jubilee of the year 2000. It was a year of celebration and pilgrimage in the Catholic Church. He led countless ceremonies. He asked for forgiveness for the historical sins of the Church. It was a moment of profound humility. He traveled to the Holy Land. He placed a prayer in a crevice of the Western Wall in Jerusalem, a gesture of reconciliation with the Jewish people. His last public appearance was from the window of his apartment overlooking St. Peter's Square. It was Easter Sunday, in March of 2005. He tried to speak. He could not. He raised his hand in a silent blessing. The world saw a man at the limit of his physical strength. A few days later, the Vatican announced he had developed a urinary tract infection. His condition worsened rapidly. He refused to return to the hospital. He chose to remain in his Vatican apartment. For several days, crowds gathered in the square below. They held a silent vigil. They prayed. They watched the lighted windows of his apartment. On the evening of the 2nd of April, 2005, he died. The announcement was made to the crowd. An official read the news. The Pope has returned to the house of the Father. The square was silent, then a long, sustained applause began. It was a traditional Roman sign of respect for a life well lived. His funeral was one of the largest gatherings in human history. Millions of pilgrims descended upon Rome. Hundreds of heads of state, kings, queens, and religious leaders from around the world attended. It was a testament to his global impact. During the ceremony, a chant rose from the crowd. Santo subito. Saint immediately. The people were demanding his immediate canonization. His life's work was complete. The boy from Wadawis who survived 2 occupations and an assassin's bullet had left an indelible mark on the 20th century.